Okay, I think we're live. I guess we'll find out here. How you doing, everybody? Chuck Holton here, coming to you from my rental car. I'm just crossing the border into California from Nevada. I've been flew into Las Vegas from Panama yesterday. That's why I didn't go live yesterday, because I was traveling all day. And I'm on my way to Yucca Valley, California, to speak at a prayer breakfast for a bunch of cops and first responders that they have there every year. Now, I'm hoping that I'm sounding and looking okay. Let me know if you are having any trouble hearing me or seeing me. I know that the angle's not the greatest for the camera. I'm kind of silhouetted, but there's not much I can do about that, just because of the direction that I'm driving. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel. There's actually quite a bit to talk about right now. Uh, the first thing that is big in the news is that the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for uh, Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. And that sounds really bad until you remember that the International Criminal Court is toothless in this. I mean, they don't have a enforcement mechanism, really. The United States and Israel are not signatories they haven't joined the International Criminal Court. So whatever the ICC comes up with, it's like, who cares? It'd be like if the government of Lesotho decided that you were a criminal and needed to be, arrested, and they put out a warrant for your arrest. Well, don't go to Lesotho and you're probably okay. Now, in this case, Benjamin Netanyahu, his travel schedule might be somewhat limited by this, because there are quite a few countries who are actually members of the International Criminal Court where he might have wanted to travel at some point for whatever reason. And we're talking about like the UK, France, Spain, Germany, places like that are all signatories to the ICC. But um, again, they would not be forced to arrest him if he went to those places. They would just be expected to, and they could decide whether or not they wanted to enforce it on their own. Obviously, it's going to be a pretty big deal to arrest the sitting prime minister of a sovereign country if he's coming for a meeting or something in your country, right? I mean, there is a current arrest warrant out for uh, Vladimir Putin as well, and he's continued to travel. He just doesn't travel to countries that probably would arrest him. But you can imagine what it would do to relations between, let's say, France or the UK or Germany and Israel if Netanyahu made a state visit to Germany, and they arrested him and sent him to The Hague for trial. You'd be looking at a war. Same thing with Vladimir Putin, right? So there you go. Now, I just want to make sure that you all can, okay, make sure that I'm looking all right and that you can hear me. Um, Another interesting thing about this finding or by the ICC is that in addition to Netanyahu and Gallant, whom they charged with crimes against humanity and war crimes, why? because they made people in Gaza's tummy hurt. I mean, they're not accused of wholesale slaughtering people in Gaza. They're accused of making it harder to get food and water and things like that inside Gaza, which of course they have done, but it's exactly what you want them to do if they were at war with a neighboring country, entity, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this idea that the the only way to prosecute a war nowadays is to try to defeat your enemy without really making him angry is, well, just plain silly. First of all, it is also a recipe for increased suffering and hardship because it just draws out the conflict forever until one of the parties just decides to stop. And the party who decides to stop first is usually the one who's paying for everything. And in this case, that would be Israel. The United States did this to great effect in Afghanistan, where we tried very hard to defeat the Taliban without actually offending him, and didn't work very well. We never defeated the Taliban, and we just kept dumping money into that conflict until we got tired of doing so, and then we just left our toys there and picked up and went home. That is not winning. That is losing. You've heard me say that a lot. And there's no other way to put it. I mean, you are expecting Israel to lose the war if you will not allow them to make their enemy suffer. And you might say, well, the people in Gaza are not the enemy. Well, they kind of are because they're still harboring the criminals who are holding hostages. And as long as there are Israeli hostages in Gaza, Israel has every right morally to make the Gazans as miserable as possible in order to get their hostages back. And the ICC, which is essentially, it seems to me, bought and paid for by entities like the Qataris, maybe the Iranians, the Russians, of course. Of course, the Russians are not even members of the ICC, along with the U.S. Russia, China, the U.S., and Israel, four notable countries that are not members of the ICC. Okay, if you're asking questions, I'm driving and I can't see your questions, so don't bother because I'm not going to be able to answer them. Now, notable in this finding or this warrant is who else was included in it, and that is three leaders from Hamas. What's notable about that is that two of the three are already dead. So what's the point in issuing an arrest warrant for two people who they know are already dead? Well, it's just a smokescreen to make it look more legitimate that, oh yeah, well, we're issuing arrest warrants for people on both sides. Well, no, you're not. You're issuing arrest warrants for dead people and Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Galan. So the the very fact, I mean, the response from the Israeli government is what you would expect, and they are absolutely just flabbergasted by this. I mean, they're just, this is so morally reprehensible. It's not even funny. But it kind of was expected after they brought this case against them months and months ago. So it doesn't really affect anything. It just makes the ICC look as worthless and biased as they really are. It's not going to stop the Israelis from prosecuting their war. It's not going to result in Benjamin Netanyahu being arrested. The only thing it might do is sort of complicate efforts to negotiate a ceasefire. But the big complicating factor there has not so far been Israel, it's been Hamas. Now, there is some good news on that front. We heard today that Hamas is now willing to talk and consider a ceasefire agreement. Again, its only big requirement in that agreement is going to be that the their organization gets to survive, and so yeah, that's not going to work for Israel. But they're talking about a 42-day ceasefire. How they come up with 42 days, I don't have any idea. No idea. Uh, and in exchange for a 42-day ceasefire, they will get, uh, some of their live hostages back in pieces. Israel obviously would be okay with that. This is a marked departure from previous ceasefire deals that were floated, because Hamas has always said that their number one, uh, drop dead deal breaker is Israel has to leave Gaza 100%, pull everybody out, end the war. And Israel's just not been willing to do that. Now, that one particular stipulation is not on the table anymore. So that's good. And so it does represent some slight progress, even though Israel has been absolutely hammering the uh, the Hamas fighters in Gaza for the last couple of weeks in Jabalia. They've captured thousands of Hamas fighters in there, specifically because they are starving them out. They encircled an area of northern Gaza, and they filtered out all the women and children. Everybody that was left, either you surrender or you die. And if I lose you here, it should come back. I'm going over a mountain, so I may lose you. The connection may go bad, but yeah, surrender or die. And thousands have surrendered, and over 1,000, about 1,400 have died so far in this operation. So uh, they are kind of breaking the code a little bit in Gaza. Certainly not finished there, but they're getting to that point. We're finding out that Hamas is uh, teaming up with criminal elements to try to stop other criminal elements from stealing all the aid. And what that tells you is that Hamas really doesn't have control over Gaza anymore. If they have to enlist the help of people they normally would have been fighting against to try to fight against other people they would have been fighting against, things are not going well for Hamas in Gaza. And that leads into a discussion of what is happening in the north. Amos Hochstein is a U.S. envoy who's been crisscrossing the area between Lebanon and Israel over the last few days and trying to negotiate a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has been open to the idea after they got permission to negotiate a ceasefire from Iran. And Iran is probably just telling them, just do what you have to do to get a ceasefire so you don't lose all the rest of the missiles that we gave you. And then we will help you better your stockpile once you guys negotiate a ceasefire. But right now, Israel has been turning the southern part of Lebanon into Gaza meaning just flattening the whole thing. Um, I I have a video clip. I can't show it to you right now, obviously, because I'm driving, but I have a video clip I want to show you about Scott Ritter saying that Lebanon is, whoops, I'm not connected now. Here we go. Now we're connected. I want to show you this video clip, but I can't, and I'll have to put it up on chuckholton.com. Uh, that is Scott Ritter on some show talking about how Israel is being defeated in Lebanon. Their troops are being destroyed. They can't hold ground. They are absolutely failing in every way, and there's no way they can win. Their economy is being destroyed, and the entire Israeli nation is about to collapse. This is his take on what's happening in Israel. Now, of course, he hasn't been to Israel lately, not during this war, so he really has no idea. He's just making this stuff up. And he has obviously an anti-Semitic axe to grind against Israel, no question about that. But if you look at like the Institute for the Study of War, which gets real-time satellite data that they purchase every day from Maxar is the satellite communications. Yeah, they got satellites that take pictures of uh, things from space, and you can buy their data. They're tracking where the Israeli army is inside Lebanon, and they're making gains every day. And they've encircled a large number of Hezbollah fighters uh, in the south by making a big loop around and then coming back to the ocean. And they're crushing it. I mean, the IDF is doing a great job in Lebanon. They are losing some troops in the process. That was certainly to be expected, but it's somewhat something on the order of two or three soldiers a day that they're losing in the fighting there. And that's on the order of what they were losing in Gaza at the height of the fighting as well. So, what that tells you is that Hezbollah is not this feared organization anymore like they were saying before. All the experts were saying that Hezbollah had 150,000 fighters and they were going to absolutely decimate Israel when they tried to go into Lebanon. And that just hasn't happened. Just literally has not happened. The operations that Israel has carried out in Lebanon have been largely successful. They say that they've destroyed 80% of Hezbollah's cache of missiles. That's good. They have wiped out well over 1,000 Hezbollah fighters. The fact that it's not a lot more than that tells you that Hezbollah is choosing not to fight in many cases. They're just backing off, and there have been a lot of Hezbollah fighters that have just chosen to pack up and leave and go to Syria. But those who are fighting without being led very well, so they're sort of disjointed and just kind of hit and miss. They haven't been able to mount a cohesive defense against Israel, and so Israel is just decimating their infrastructure in the south. So Hezbollah is open to a ceasefire. That ceasefire would be a semi-permanent ceasefire as long as the conditions are met. The conditions that Israel is talking about is that number one, Hezbollah pulls back behind the Litani River. Number two, the Lebanese army and UNIFIL maybe would be enforcing that fact. And number three, the Israelis would maintain the right to strike inside Lebanon anytime they feel threatened or if they feel like Hezbollah is starting to move back in. That's been the sticking point. Hezbollah is like, no, we're not going to go for that one. And Israel's like, well, then we'll just keep striking you as is. And that may be the way it ends up being. Now, Am I hopeful for this? Not really, because there are a lot of holes in this, this ceasefire agreement. Hole number one is that the Lebanese army and Hezbollah and UNIFIL are all in cahoots. So trusting the Lebanese army to watch Hezbollah is like trusting, one criminal to watch the other criminals. It's like hiring some Somali pirates and getting them to be the police to guard against other Somali pirates, which is exactly what the UAE did several years ago, and it failed utterly. You're hiring the very people that hiring them to guard themselves, which really doesn't work. On top of that, UNIFIL, of course, we know is beyond worthless. They're actually in the tank for Hezbollah. Hezbollah is looking to just survive, and Israel's notably their objectives in Lebanon do not include wiping out Hezbollah. They just include making Hezbollah stop shooting at them. So, am I hopeful for a ceasefire up there? Not really. If it happens, that'd be great. But more likely, it the fighting in the north will stop when the fighting in Gaza stops. And so, getting a ceasefire in Gaza is the key to getting a ceasefire in the north. Now, Iran, not to be outdone, came out again yesterday and said, "Hey, don't forget about us. We still plan on striking at Israel anytime. We're gonna it's going to be the mother of all ballistic missile strikes." And Israel's starting to look at Iran like they look at the Houthis, like, yeah, 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 whatever. Send it. I mean, if I was Netanyahu, that would be my message to Iran. I'd just get on TV and just look really close at the camera and go, "Hey, Iran, send it. Send it already. Quit talking and send it. Let's see what you got. We'll shoot them down like we did the last time, and this time we'll hit your oil rigs. Thank you very much." I mean, that would be my answer to that. And that's essentially what Israel has been saying, just in a much more diplomatic language, of course, right? Uh, Obviously, Rangers are not known for their diplomacy. They're known for absolutely positively, if you need something destroyed overnight, send us, and we're good at wrecking things. So, um, you know, that's why I would not make a real good politician. But anyway, so we're still kind of waiting with popcorn and a yawn, uh, uh, to see if Iran strikes at Israel again. In the meantime, I wanted to talk real quick before I go. I'm going to end this here in about 3 minutes, but I wanted to talk real quick about uh, what happened in Ukraine yesterday. No doubt you probably saw that on the news, and if you didn't, it's a notable thing. The Russian government or Russian military struck Ukraine last night with an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now that sounds real scary because it's never happened before. There's never been an ICBM that was used in combat. It was actually used offensively against another country. But that is not the concerning part. The fact that it was an ICBM is just a ballistic missile. The fact that it has intercontinental in front of it just means it has longer range, which they didn't even really need. So there wasn't even the only reason they even used the ICBM is because of another technology that the ICBM carries, and that's called MIRV technology, MIRV. MIRV it stands for multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles. And you might notice there's a T missing in that acronym, because then it would be MIRTV, and it just wouldn't sound as good. So they just call it MIRV, multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles. What that means is that ICBM can carry multiple warheads, not just one, and probably like maybe 6 or 8. It just depends. And so that means that upon re-entry into the atmosphere, that the MIRV technology basically breaks up and fires a bunch of missiles at once. So think of it this way: Russia could have fired 6 or 8 missiles from Russia that would have flown to different targets and struck Ukraine. Instead, what they did is they fired one missile that flew all the way to Ukraine and then broke up into 6 or 8 missiles and struck different targets. Each of those missiles, it's more about the size of the warhead, obviously, but how big of an explosion do they make? To put it mildly, it was sort of a non-event. I mean, yes, it caused some damage, even a couple of injuries. As far what I could find online, I did not see any reports of any deaths from that strike. So it's kind of a nothing burger, except for the fact of the message that Russia was trying to send. And the message was, hey, these ICBMs can carry nuclear warheads. So there's that. But also, these ICBMs can reach much further than Ukraine. They can reach Western Europe or even to the United States. Now, so it's more about the theater that that Vladimir Putin is looking for, the theatrical effect of sending an ICBM into Ukraine, than it is about the actual damage that ICBM did. So yeah, it damaged some buildings in Dnipro, and a few people were injured, but it really wasn't all that big of a deal. And this is more posturing from uh, Vladimir Putin. He is trying to scare the West into backing off of their support for Ukraine. He's doing this because the United States has given Ukraine the permission to use longer range missiles on Russia, and they have been using them. Now, in reality, it's not that big a deal. I mean, the places that Ukraine is striking are not actually, it's not like they're deep inside Russia. They're not striking, you know, even Moscow. And honestly, the Ukrainians have drones that can strike much further inside Russia than these missiles that the United States is giving to Ukraine. And Ukraine has been using those drones. Ukraine has struck Moscow multiple times. They've struck more than 600 kilometers uh, inside Russia already with huge drone attacks. And so the fact that the drones that Ukraine is using were made in Ukraine and not in the West is kind of irrelevant. If you think about it, I mean, an explosion is an explosion, an attack is an attack. And like I pointed out before, Russia has already been using missiles and drones from Iran and North Korea to strike deep inside Ukraine. So Russia's like, they're doing it, but they're saying, well, Ukraine better not do it or we're going to go nuclear. No, they're not. They're not going to go nuclear. They're not that stupid. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Don't get your undies in a wad or anything about uh, Ukraine dragging us into World War III. They're not. Like I said, we're already in World War III and here in the U.S. Because if we know one thing for sure, It's that the left is going to pull out all the stops to try to make life as miserable as possible over the next 4 years to try to scare you out of ever again voting for a Republican. So you can get those hints and tips and checklists and everything, downloadable format by becoming a supporter over at chuckholton.com. And again, that helps keep us in the field and helps us help people uh, that are also, in need. Okay. All right. So that is, okay. That's all I've got for today. Like I say, I'm on my way to Yucca Valley, California. I'll be speaking. Is today Friday? Today's Thursday. I'll be speaking tomorrow morning at, uh, like I said, men's prayer breakfast in Yucca Valley, and we're going to try to live stream it here. So stay tuned for that if you want to watch my speech live. And it's going to be good. I don't have any idea what I'm going to talk about, but I'll figure that out before I get up there to speak, hopefully. And so I'd like to say appreciate all of you. Please subscribe to the podcast, like and share this on all your social media and everything. And we will see you guys again later. All right. I take care. Bye bye.